All right. So this picture on the front is your Parkland burn formula. That's the when they look at somebody, they're going to look at the percentage of burn that someone has. And so, like, if they say the anterior of the chest, that's going to be 18%. If they say the 4% is going to be the front arm, but if they say the entire arm's been burned, it's going to be the 4% in the anterior and the 4% in the posterior. So that's where these numbers of the burn are coming from. Yeah.
Is it 4 or 4.5?
4.5, because it's 9 total. Right. Good. And so, like, the leg is 9% on the front, it'll be 9% on the back, 18 in all. Okay. Now, the formula that you're going to use is, it says number 1 down there at the bottom, calculate the total body surface area burned by using the rule of 9 above. And that's what our little character is from. And in your scenarios, so the ones we have, they tell you what the percentage of burn is. And so the formula is the body surface area times the kilograms times 4, and that's going to be the total volume in milliliters that the patient's going to get in 24 hours. Now, when you do, like, let's say it comes out to 18% burn, you're not going to put in 18% or 0.18. You're going to put in the number 18, okay? Then the next thing, because when somebody's had a burn, we need to get all that fluid in right away. So they're going to get half of the total 24-hour fluid in the first 8 hours. So even if they get to the hospital 2 hours before the 8 hours time is up, they need to get it all in that 2 hours. Okay? Then the next 2 hours and the final 8 hours, the second 8 hours and the final 8 hours, that's going to be a quarter of it. So it's going to look kind of like this. So this is like your 24-hour total. Half of it is going to go in the first 8 hours. And then a quarter of it is in the second 8 hours. And then another quarter is in the third 8 hours. So does that make sense so far? All right. Now let's do the math. All right. So number 1 on the next page. So Mr. Lubdub has sustained a 45% total body surface area burn. His weight is 75 kilograms. So the first part of this is a 3-part question. So the first part, A, how many mLs will he receive over the first 24 hours? So we're going to take, what's the body surface area in this case? 45. So we're going to take 45 times, how much does he weigh in kilograms? 75 kilograms. Times your 4 mLs. And that's going to equal our 24 hours. And don't panic when you get some big numbers. So that's going to be 13,500. And that's going to be how many mLs this patient is going to get in 24 hours.
13,500.
Mm-hmm. Everybody good with that part? All right, now part 2. How many mLs will he receive in the first 8 hours? So we just take that 13,500 and just divide it by 2. And that gives us 6,750 mLs. And then part C is how will what will the rate be in mLs per hour for the first 8 hours? So we've got the total volume, 6,750, divided by the 8 hours. And that equals 843.75. And we'll just round that to the first whole number. So 844 mLs per hour. All right. Good so far on this one? Okay. Now let's make things a little bit more interesting. Now remember I told you that everything, that first 8 hours had to have all the fluid. And when we start our 8 hours, it's at the time when our patient is burned. So in number 2, Mrs. Hart is burned over 20% of her body at 7 o'clock. She receives 400 mLs of fluid in transport to the hospital. She arrives at the hospital at 10 o'clock. She weighs 82 kilograms. So part A is how many mLs will she receive over the first 24 hours. So our setup is just the same. What's her percentage of burn? 20. And how many kilograms does she weigh? 82. And times our 4 mLs. And that gives us 6,560. And so that's for our 24 hours. All right. Now part B. How will you set the pump for the first 24 hours? Now this is where it gets interesting. First, what we have to do is figure out what this patient's going to receive in the first 8 hours. Then what we have to do is take out the amount of fluid that she got on the way to the hospital. Okay? So in the first 8 hours, she's going to get 6,560 divided by 2. And so that's 3,280 mLs in the first 8 hours. Now, how much fluid did she receive on the way to the hospital?
400.
Right. So we've got to take out that 400. And so that leaves us 2,880 mLs. Now we have to adjust for the time that it took her to get to the hospital from the time that she was burned. So she was burned at 7 o'clock, right? So what's 8 hours starting at 7 o'clock? 3 o'clock in the afternoon? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. So she needs to get this entire volume in by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And she arrived at the hospital at 10 o'clock. So how many more hours does she have? Good job. So we just divide that by 5. And we get 576 mLs per hour. Now part C is how many mLs will she receive during the second 8 hours. So we've already adjusted for the time she took to get to the hospital. She's got all her fluids for the first 8 hours, so we're good there. So now we just have to calculate what she's going to get for the second 8 hours. And so we take our 6,560 and divide it by 4. And we get 1,640 mLs. And that's what she's going to get for the second 8 hours.
Can you just take the 3280?
You could.
Put that in half and just
Exactly.
divide by, like, 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, the thing to remember is don't use the 2,880 if you're going to do it that way. Take that total. And it's fine to do it that way. You'll get the same answer. Okay. Good so far? All right. You ready to try one on your own? All right, let's do number 3 on your own. Yeah, I apologize for the long pause you guys are going to have on this video if you watch it again. So you just hit that button and then just pop. All right. So 18-year-old Brenda Beat sustains a 43% total body surface area burn at 10 o'clock. She arrived at the ER at 1500 and she weighs 150 pounds. All right. So first of all, we'll calculate the kilograms. And I usually tell you guys to go out to about 4 decimal places at least. They say, and that'll cover most of your rounding issues. Oops. So 150 divided by 2.2 equals 68.1818. All right. So how much percent, what's her body surface area that's been burned? Very good. And her kilograms, we figured to be 68.1818. And times our 4 mLs. And that's going to give us and 11,727.27. All right, now, so that's going to be the first 24 hours. Now part B, how many mLs will she receive from 10 to 1800? And so that's our first eight hours, right? Mm-hmm. And she did not get any fluid on the way there, so I just have to divide that by 2. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to round it.
It would tell you.
It'll tell you what to round it to.
Be very careful. Most of you guys missed it because you didn't listen to like what it said. Round to the 10th, round to the 100th, round to the 1,000th, round to a whole number. Look for that. It will tell you specifically what to round to.
I guess I'm asking because I round at the very beginning when I divided by 2.2.
You don't round till you're ready to give your answer.
At the end.
Yeah.
Period.
Period.
And then, so when I look for the kilograms, I leave those thousands placed there?
Yep. Because it will change your answer. You always want to leave up to 4 trailing behind in order for your answer not to get changed. If you don't leave a whole number like that, then you'll end up getting a different answer.
So then when you're doing like a test question, you're moving to part B, if it asks you to round to a whole number for the first one for part B, would you get a rounded?
if it told you to do, but I doubt it would. We're not gonna tell you to, it's gonna at the very end ask you to round.
So we're
So,
gonna have a I mean, you're gonna be doing multiple steps.
you'll be doing multiple steps, but you'll only round at the end. Just like that. She's the woman. That's why I have her come up here.
And I did notice in this scenario, they do round it, so they do.
Yeah, but
All right. But they'll tell you, just do what they tell you to do on the
Yeah.
test. Okay?
whatever they tell you to do on the test, do it.
Right. All right. So how many mLs will she receive in that first 8 hours? We're just going to divide it by our 2. And we get all right, so that's going to be for our first 8 hours. And how will you set the pump to deliver the first 8 hour total? And so she was burned at 10 o'clock. So when is our 8 hours up? 1800, right? So what time did she get to the hospital? 1500. So how many hours do we have left to get this fluid in? 3 hours. Good. Oops.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, or run it past her over the phone.
Some pumps go faster. Our pumps go.
So you get 1,954 mLs per hour. Oh, sorry, I rounded that wrong. I lied. Five mLs per hour. All right. Did everybody, any questions on this one? You're lost? Okay. Where'd you get lost?
Well, first of all, I didn't round in the correct place, so all of my answers are different.
Okay, but
So-
for the, at least for the kilograms now, you know that you need to keep that out to the first four decimal places, right?
Now I do.
Okay. So, but did you get the body surface area times the weight times the volume, the 4 mLs per hour? Okay, and so then you're going to get a number, right?
Right?
Now, did you take that number and divide it by 2?
I did.
All right. So you got that part of the concept right. And now, did you take that volume that you got for the first 8 hours and then divide it by the time that still needed to get to the hospital? I mean, the time left in the 8 hours?
I don't think I did that.
All right. So what you need to do is remember what time the patient was burned and then subtract out, that's going from the time your patient gets burned, you want to figure out what the first 8 hours will be. And then you need to take out what time she got to the hospital. When are you going to start giving all this fluid? In this case, she was burned at 10 o'clock, but she didn't get to the hospital until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we've got to get that entire 8 hours of fluid in only 3 hours. Is that better?
Yeah, I get it.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, let's do the last one together. It's kind of a big one. All right. The 68-year-old Mrs. Tachycardia, and I don't make these questions up, sustained 22% burn at 8 o'clock. She arrived in the ER department at 9 o'clock. She weighs 251 pounds. So the first part of the question is, how many mLs of the IV fluid will she receive in the 24 hours? We can kind of all do it together.
The first thing is to convert the pounds to kilograms.
Right. Mm-hmm. Good. So she weighs 251 pounds. So I got 96.3636. And oh, did I do it wrong?
142.
I have no idea how I put that in. Don't pay any attention to that part. 251 divided by 2.2. 909. There, does that look better? All right, and that's why you need to clear out your calculator before you do things again. All right, so that's what how much she weighs. So now, how much was she burned? 22 times our kilograms and times our 4 mLs. All right. Did you get 10,040 mLs for the first? Good. For the first 24 hours. Now.
Again, the way we know it's round is because it'll say it on the problem. It's here it
Right.
does say.
Yeah. All right. So how many mLs will she receive from 9 to 1600? Now, just notice that 9 here is just the time she arrived at the hospital. So she's still going to get that first aid because she didn't receive any fluid on the way to the hospital. She's going to get 5,020 mLs in the first 8 hours. All right. Now, how would you set the pump to deliver this amount in answer B? So she arrived at the hospital at 9 o'clock, and so she's got how many hours before our 8 hours are up? 7 hours. Good. And 717.14. And so 717 mLs per hour. Everybody good so far? All right. Now part D. How many mLs will she receive from 1600 to midnight? So that's our second 12 hours, right? Our second 8 hours. Good. And so you can either take what you got for the 8 hours and divide it by 2, or you can take what you got for the 24 hours and divide it by 4.
We've got the first 8 hours in, and now we're doing the second 8 hours. Wouldn't it just be 5,020?
No, because that's going to be a half. Remember?
Okay, so it's a quarter.
Right, it's a quarter. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
First 8, and here's your second 8, and here's your third 8. There. And did you get 2,510 mLs?
Yeah.
Good. And now they're going to ask, how will you set the pump to deliver this volume? And so there's no time issues, so we just divide it by 8. Mm-hmm. All right. Oops. And 3.75 mLs per hour. Did everybody get that?
Yeah.
Good. Now, this is all we've got for the practice, so if you want to come down, we can always make some up for you. And we have fun doing that too. So, any questions? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so they'll give you, and again, remember the BSA, you can stop it.
Okay.
I mean, you can continue it.